A leading conservative voice in the House is firing back at the new Democratic majority already. Quote, "We knew they couldn't help themselves," tweets Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan. Rep. Sherman files articles of impeachment on the president. Dems are more focused on stopping Trump than building the wall and helping the country. Okay, so during the speakership vote today, my next guest voted for Jordan. Instead of voting for the new GOP minority leader, Kevin McCarthy, he also got to vote himself for the leading role. Joining us now is Republican Congressman from Kentucky, Thomas Massie. Great to have you with us tonight.
Thanks for having me in the studios.
Okay, let me ask you, curiously, why did you vote for Jordan over McCarthy today?
Jordan said, let's do what we told the people we would do when we campaigned. And, when it looked like we might still be in the majority, Jordan was running for Speaker. And I pledged my vote to him for Speaker, and I followed through even though it's a vote for Minority Leader. And I think that's what people want us to do. They want us to just do what we said we would do. And it was an easy vote for me. Now, I did get one vote for Speaker.
You did.
I tied with Joe Biden. He got one vote.
The Speaker vote's always very fun to watch.
It is fun to watch. It was more fun to watch the Democrat side because they had fractures over there that you're starting to see. Some of their members who are to the left of Nancy Pelosi, if you can imagine that, were fracturing away from her. But she was able to hang on in the Speaker vote, and that's where all the drama was, really.
It was. Okay, so tonight, more drama. Just a short time ago, you guys were over on the Hill voting on some measures to get the government reopened and funded. Obviously, the Democrats are in control now, so what they offer up is not going to be the ideal package that you're going to want to see.
Right.
But as I asked Chris, this goes to the Senate now. The president has said he will not sign this stuff without wall funding. Nancy Pelosi says you get $0 for the wall, maybe $1.
Right.
So how in the world do you resolve this while the American people and 800,000 federal government workers wait for a solution?
Well, I think we all forgot that cartoon we watched, Schoolhouse Rock. When the Senate passes a bill and the House passes a bill dealing with the same topic and their differences, they both appoint members to a conference committee who go together and negotiate a compromise bill, which then goes back to each chamber. That's the old Schoolhouse Rock cartoon. And then each chamber votes on it up or down. No amendments can be offered. And so that's really where I think we should go next. But as you saw Pelosi, she doesn't want to give $1 for the wall.
Maybe one, she said.
And I agree with Chris. This is a rounding error in our federal budget. I mean, not to take it lightly, but we spent $100 billion on disaster relief for Texas, Florida, and California and Puerto Rico last year. That's $100 billion for those disasters. What about the disaster at our border? Can't we spend $5 billion on that?
Well, let me ask you about Senator Cory Gardner, a Republican, who says we should not be figuring out this wall funding in the midst of funding the wall. He says we should pass the bipartisan appropriations bills. That includes money for border security. While we continue to fight for more border security money, Congress needs to take further action on border security, but that work should be done when it's fully open, when the government's funded.
No, I think this is where Trump needs to make his stand. He's got a good position. 3/4 of the government is entitlements. That goes on whether we vote for it or not. That's not shut down. And of the appropriations, 3/4 of that is funded. The military is funded, Department of Education, Department of Labor. There's a lot of government that has been funded. So we're talking about 1/4 of a quarter that's not funded right now. The president is right to take his stand here.
You say use leverage. Before you go, I want to ask you, today you have reintroduced your bill. It's bipartisan.
Yes.
To audit the Fed. Does it go anywhere? What happens next?
It's passed twice in the House with a veto-proof majority. And now I think the president could support something like this. Like
he has some issues with the Fed.
He's not a big fan of the Fed, so I think it's the best time now, more than ever, to pass audit the Fed. I think the president would sign it, and we just need to get it passed in the Senate.
Okay, well, we will watch. Keep us updated, because
right.
a lot of Americans out there, they want to get their eyes on some of that information, too.
Thanks,
All right, Congressman, great to have you with us tonight.
Good to be here.
Carl Rowe with us right now. Carl, what do you think?
Well, we don't know where it's going because we have sort of two people who are dug in. The president wants to build, as he should, necessary portions of the wall along the southern border. And Nancy Pelosi, for political reasons, and a lot of Democrats in the leadership, including Chuck Schumer, have decided to make this a political battle, not base it on the merits of whether we need to do this or not, but simply say, let's deny President Trump what he wants. I'd remind Senator Schumer that he voted for 700 miles of wall. In 2006, we built, I think, about 654 miles of wall along the southern border. And so we haven't even finished the task that he supported along with 79 other members of the Senate in 2006. And if Nancy Pelosi believes so fervently that there shouldn't be any wall along the southern border, let her assign an early number, that is to say, bring up early a bill that calls for the removal of all the barriers and obstacles and fencing and wall that we have along our southern border. And let's see how many Democrats are willing to follow her off the edge of the cliff on that one.
Carl, you know, the one thing that I'm curious about is where this is going, because the two sides are far apart. To your point, Democrats aren't going to budge on anything for a wall or variation thereof. The president has come down on his price tag for this, but as you've reminded me in the past, it's a down payment on something further along. So we could be looking at a shutdown that could drag on for quite some time.
Well, look, I think the president ought to take the Democrat deal of saying, okay, we're going to fund the rest of the government except the Department of Homeland Security, and that would focus it entirely not on the national parks, not on the Agriculture Department, not on these other branches of the agencies of the federal government that are being hurt by the shutdown, but to focus it on one thing and one thing only, which is the defense of the homeland through the Department of Homeland Security. Because, look, we need in certain places of the border to have a wall. I've been, you know, early on when the president was talking as a candidate about building a wall along the whole southern border, I frankly mocked it because there's many parts along the 1,954 mile border with Mexico where we don't need a wall. But there are places where we need fences or barriers to automobiles or walls or other forms of obstacles in order to keep people from coming across the border freely. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But if the Democrats believe that the wall is wrong, then let them show the courage of their convictions by calling for the removal of, passing a piece of legislation through the House that calls for the removal of the 654 miles of fencing and wall and obstacles that we've already erected.
You know, Carl, having worked with President Bush, I mean, it is unusual for the president to go out in the briefing room himself.
Right.
Obviously,
Absolutely.
President Bush did it often enough. Barack Obama now and then. This president, I believe, the first time he was in the briefing room. That doesn't mean he hasn't addressed reporters. Of course, he has many times. But what is the significance of that?
Well, I think it's actually welcome because one of the things that's been interesting the last couple of weeks is that the White House has not used the bully pulpit to beat this issue harder. And so the president, by coming out with members of the Border Patrol and our Homeland Security Department, I think sent a good message to the country. Imagine what he could have done had he had a meeting, if he wanted to embarrass Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, had a meeting where Chuck Schumer is across town and unwilling to come down to the White House, and Nancy Pelosi's in Hawaii and unwilling to come to the White House for meetings during the Christmas holidays to stop the shutdown by coming to some resolution of this. I listened with interest to Ari Fleischer earlier. I think he is absolutely right. The normal course of these kind of controversies would be to find something that each side wants to have that it can't get without the other side giving on it, and let both sides have a win. The Democrats, if they really cared about the Dreamers, would say, you know what, we're willing to, we gave him $1.6 billion for the wall last year, and our country didn't collapse. Let's give him $2.5 billion for the wall this year, but we want to fix for the Dreamers, for the hundreds of thousands of people who were brought here as children and know no country other than the United States of America, but who have no pathway to citizenship. They could easily come up with that, but no, this is about politics. It's not about resolving the issue.
No, I caught a part of that interview that Nancy Pelosi has had with a number of sources. One strikes me as rather revealing her exchange with USA Today, in which she said her relationship with your old boss, George Bush, was respectful. She admired him, liked him. She didn't seem to feel that way about President Trump. Now, I'm giving this short shrift. That was the gist of her comment, that George Bush, whatever the differences she had with him, that he was grounded in truth, more or less saying that this president is not. What did you think of that?
Well, fine, she's entitled to her opinion, but what does that mean with regard to getting things done? The object is not to simply score political points and to make yourself feel better by describing your opponent as you actually feel he ought to be described. It's about getting things done for the country. And again, I repeat, there is a deal that's possible here in which the Democrats get something they want and the Republicans under Donald Trump get something they want, and the country would be better off for it.
All right, real quickly, the market's been all over the map, dropping big time today. A number of technology issues that everyone from sophisticated investors to average mom and pop, investors at home have seen their holdings cut in half in some cases. When does this escalate to become a worry, do you think, for both parties?
Well, I've been worried about the markets for a while. I'm not an expert in the markets, but it strikes me when you've got slowing growth in China, where you've got the threat of a world trade war, when you have all the kind of instability that we have in the Middle East, when you have an aggressive China and an aggressive Russia, and when you've got a softening of the economy abroad, even the great American economic machine can't run its way all the way through all of that by itself. And so I'm not an economy expert. I'm an investor. I'm investing for the long term. So I'm willing to. I understand markets go down and markets come come up, and I'm counting over the long term them coming up more than they go down.
Long term for me, Carl, is tomorrow lunch. So that's just my kind of take on things. All right, thank you.
Mine's dinner. Mine's dinner
good.
tomorrow.
Well, you have a longer term horizon.
I got a longer horizon than you do.
Absolutely. All right, thank you, my friend, very, very much.